What's going on, everybody? Off the Mike Sports Network here. So we're already off and running here on the last regular season week of college football, rivalry week. We had an upset, um, one that a lot of people had on their radar because a lot of people were having their questions about Texas A&M as the number 3 team in the country, undefeated, but largely playing nobody since their big win on the road against Notre Dame early on in the season. They face Texas on the road and they lose. Marcel Reed throws 2 fourth-quarter interceptions that ultimately cost them the game. Arch Manning, listen, I got to give it to Arch Manning. The guy's played really well the last half of the season. I know he played some bad teams. Texas A&M, that's a pretty good defense, and he played really well in the second half of that game. And Texas won, and they're 9-3. They're in the clubhouse, and they wait. And now we've got the argument of, hey, they're number 16 in the country. And does Texas, a 3-loss SEC team, have any chance of making the college football playoff now in the clubhouse at 9-3 with a win over the number 3 team in the country, Texas A&M? My answer to that question is no. I don't think they should be in. I don't think they have very much of a case unless a whole hell of a lot happens. The committee has told you basically from jump that when they dropped them this week, they dropped them past Michigan. Michigan they both beat similar type teams. Michigan beat Maryland and Texas beat Arkansas. They beat 2 terrible teams. And they flip, and Michigan now is ahead of Texas. And that was very telling to me in the first thing. But here's the other thing. And I charted this before I started going live here. There is just no room for Texas to make the college football playoff if things hold to form. Now, here we go. Ohio State, no matter what happens against Michigan, they're in. No matter what happens, they're in. They're undefeated. They've been the best team in college football all year. Indiana won at Purdue. Not surprisingly, they're in the clubhouse at 12-0. They're likely playing for the Big Ten. They are playing for the Big Ten championship next week. And there's no way that they're not going to play for the Big Ten championship. So Texas A&M, even though they lost, they're in. And if there's any consolations for you Aggies fans, you might get a home playoff game in College Station after, and you avoid the SEC championship game. So you don't have to play an extra game. You're probably going to get a home playoff game because I don't see them dropping you past. I don't see them dropping you past any of the 2-loss teams. I just don't. Like I said, losing on the road at the end of your season to Texas, which is probably the best team you played, I don't think they're going to get penalized that much. They should be a home playoff game, but they may not. They probably don't have a bye anymore. Georgia lock. They finished 11-1. They're playing for the SEC championship again next week. They beat Georgia Tech. That was actually a really impressive win. A kind of a grinded out game. Texas Tech. Even if they the only way that I see Texas Tech getting left out of this thing is if they somehow lose their season finale. I don't see that happening. Though if they go to the Big 12 title game as a 1-loss team, they're going to get in. Texas Tech is one of the best teams in college football. They might be in position for a bye. That was the big thing there is Texas A&M loses Texas Tech. If they win out and win the Big 12 championship, I think that there's a real strong possibility that they get one of the 4 byes in the 12-team college football playoff. Then we get to some teams that are a little bit murky. Oregon winning in. So if they beat Washington tomorrow, which has been a thorn in Dan Lanning's side, Oregon will be in the college football playoff as a 1-loss team. Ole Miss, regardless of what happens with Lane Kiffin, and that's going to be a topic of discussion all Saturday, Ole Miss will be in the college football playoff. They're not leaving a 1-loss SEC team out because their head coach left. I mean, come on. But Ole Miss is in. Oklahoma. So we're now to 8 teams. Oklahoma winning in. They beat LSU at home on Saturday. They're in. Notre Dame, we're now down to 9. Notre Dame, they win, they're in. I'm sorry, Miami fans. Notre Dame is playing like one of the best teams in college football. They may carry you in potentially, but Notre Dame winning in my opinion. They have a case to be one of they're one of the best teams in college football. They frankly, as good as the one thing that's sinking them really is the fact that those 2 losses early in the season may cost them a home playoff game. But Notre Dame's going to get in if they beat Stanford, and they should beat Stanford, even if it's at 10:30 body clock, 7:30 Pacific time on Saturday. Alabama, this is interesting. Alabama in the 10 hole, they win and they're in as far as I'm concerned. I think regardless of what happened in an SEC title game against Georgia, I think Alabama will get in if they win. Again, if they win the Iron Bowl, I think if they make the SEC title game, you can't leave. You can't leave. Even if they become a 3-loss team, I don't think you should penalize them for losing in the conference championship game against a team that they would have beaten already on their field in Georgia. So Bama's in. So we're down to 10 teams. If everything just right there, holds to form, Texas has no case to get into the playoff. Zero case. Because you still have the group of 5 team and the ACC champion. So I just listed you 10 teams that if everything holds to form, they are in. Okay? Now, if chaos ensues, let's say BYU. Let's say BYU wins their home finale and then beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship. I think BYU and Texas Tech get in. So that's an interesting thing. Miami is very interesting. They really have no hope of getting into the ACC title game, but I think Miami is in a better position to get into the college football playoff than Texas is. If we're going to, like I said, this is where Texas has problems. Miami has less losses. Yes, their 2 losses are considered relatively, I guess you could say, bad. Louisville, I guess, is kind of bad. SMU might be playing for the ACC title, so that's a ranked loss. So Miami probably has a better case because they beat Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame, who's going to make this thing. And if you put Notre Dame in, you better put Miami in because they beat them. So that's a problem. Utah, love Utah and Kyle Whittingham. They won their season finale. They need BYU to lose to even have a chance, and they would have to win the Big 12 title over Texas Tech to even get in. So then there's Vandy, and then there's Michigan. So Vandy win against Tennessee. They're in. A lot of people on the Texas side are going to be smart asses here and basically say, yeah, we beat them. Well, here's the difference. Vandy's 2 losses. Here's what Vandy's 2 losses are. To Texas and to Bama, both on the road. You want to know, and here's the thing, and I'll get to this in a second. Texas lost to Florida. That's the worst loss of any team in being considered in this. That's even worse than Alabama losing to Florida State. Texas lost by 8 points on the road to a Florida team that soon after fired their head coach. Don't blame Ohio State in scheduling that game because I'm not going to have that. If you guys are going to say, yeah, we shouldn't schedule, opening games and a huge out of conference games anymore, go ahead, be pussies about it. Be jackasses about it. The reason that you are in consideration to be left out of the playoff as a 3-loss team, even though you just beat the number 3 team in the country, is 1, you lost to Florida. So even if Vandy's going to have a better position because they have 1 less loss than you. Yes, the head-to-head doesn't come into play. The reason why head-to-head is an issue with Miami and Notre Dame is because they're going to potentially have the same records. If Miami and Notre Dame both win on Saturday, they have the same records, but Notre Dame's playing better right now. That's more of an argument. This is not. You're a 3-loss team. Yes, one of your losses is effectively like a wash because you lost 14-7 to the number 1 team in the country. You play them tougher than anyone. I don't care. Explain to me how in basically, I think it was back-to-back weeks. Don't quote me on this. Mississippi State and Kentucky, back-to-back weeks, you got taken to overtime by 2 of the worst teams in your league, and you lost to maybe the worst team in the league, Florida, who fired their head coach. There's no reason for them to be in the playoff. I already gave you guys 10 teams that are in solidly. There's at least, I would guarantee you right now, based off what I'm looking at, unless something crazy, like Ohio State, Indiana are locks. A&M, despite losing, is a lock. Georgia's a lock. Texas Tech, unless something crazy happens, is a lock. Ole Miss, despite their head coaching situation, is a lock. So that's 6 teams right there. 6 teams with less losses and that are already like basically in the clubhouse, and they really have solidified their positions in this playoff. Then there's a bunch of win and ins. You've got Oregon, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama. And if those 4 teams wins, that's 10 spots right there. And bear in mind, I haven't mentioned an ACC team because Miami's not going to be in the ACC title game. So they're going to probably be left on the outside looking at it if everything holds to form. Miami would be in better position, in my opinion, to ultimately get into the playoff over at Texas because they have less losses and they have one of the better wins on the board. Yes, I understand that Texas A&M, that was a significant win for Texas, but it's just, to me, they're not making the playoff unless total utter chaos happens. So They would let me kind of break this down for you guys. They would need they're definitely rooting for LSU because that would absolutely help Texas because that's one of their big wins that they're holding on to is Oklahoma. So they need Oklahoma to lose. They need Oregon. They probably need Oregon to lose. You'll probably need one. I mean, maybe Texas Tech, if they lose back-to-back games, doesn't have a case to get into the playoff. I doubt it. Um, they need Notre Dame to lose to Stanford. That's not happening. They need Alabama to lose the Iron Bowl. That could happen. And if that does happen, that could be something. BYU, as a one-loss team, they need them to lose. And, BYU is probably not going to have much of a hope to get in unless they beat Texas Tech and take the auto bid. And if BYU does that, that's stealing Texas's spot. And then, like I said, Miami, if you want to argue with me about Vandy, I don't think that that's a realistic argument. Yes, they beat them head-to-head, but still, Vandy has one less loss. I understand that they didn't play Ohio State. I don't care. Michigan, if they beat Ohio State, that's going to make things really interesting too. I know a lot of Ohio State fans don't want to talk about that and have a fifth straight loss staring them in the face, despite being the number one team all season long. But yeah, like I said, I went down the list. At least 10 teams, if everything is solidified. Texas ain't going to the college football playoff unless utter anarchy happens. They're not going to the playoff. They don't have a case. Don't lose to Florida. And one thing that's going to really bother me, because I've already seen Steve Sarkisian lobbying for this and trying to act like the Ohio State game didn't happen. It did happen. You know what? And if you don't want to schedule it, that's your own prerogative, because then you look like a bunch of cowards. Okay? So please don't do that, because that's not the reason you're not in the mix for this thing. I completely omitted the fact that your other big opportunity left on your schedule, you got destroyed by Georgia. You had every opportunity to play your way in with that. If you were even close, you'd have an argument. To me, even at 9-3, a 3-loss SEC team is not getting in unless total utter anarchy happens. Texas would have a case if anarchy happened, but you would need Vandy to lose a game. You need, like I said, Oregon would need to lose. Even that would be kind of murky. You'd need a lot of shit to happen in order for you to have a case to even be mentioned as one of the 12 teams in that playoff. And a lot of crazy shit could happen, and I could jump on here and maybe try to make a case for it. But as of now, as I'm recording this right after Thanksgiving on Black Friday, after they won, it's a nice win. It's not getting you into the playoff. Don't lose to Florida. Don't get pushed around by Mississippi State and Kentucky. Don't do that. And you're in a much better position to make this playoff. It's not about what happened in week 1. I don't care. I do not care. I've already listed you all. There is not a mathematical way for this team to get into the playoff. And if they do get in without utter chaos happening, it is bullshit. And this playoff is a sham. And I know these people, despite what we think of this committee, they're not letting them in. They're not letting them in unless, like I said, Bama's going to have to lose. And then they'd be kind of compared based off of, okay, Bama would have had, a loss to an Auburn team. But even if let's also put this out there before I go. Let's say this. What if Alabama beats Auburn but then loses to Georgia in the SEC title game? They're still getting in. They're still getting in because they already beat Georgia. So even in that scenario, you're with another team suffering a loss in front of you. And like I said, if Miami beats Pitt, which is questionable, and they finish at 10-2, Miami's got a better path. And even their path is very slim too. So, like I said, I just broke that down for you guys in about 13, 14 minutes. I just don't see a way that Texas makes this playoff unless absolute chaos happens and you have multiple, and I'm saying at least 2 or 3 notable upsets on Saturday. It can't be in the conference championship round. It has to happen tomorrow. And you're rooting hard for Washington, you're rooting hard for LSU, you're rooting hard for Tennessee, you're rooting hard for Pitt. Like I named you a bunch of the options, and even then it's really murky for this team to even have a chance to shoot up all the way. Like, you would have to have all those things happen, and that would be so incredible if that happened. And then, hey, Texas, congratulations, you are a 3-loss team, and this crazy college football season where you started the season number 1, you make the playoff. I just don't see that happening. So anyway, thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.